Okay, to tell you the truth, I made this video yesterday, and then I deleted it all. And then I took a deep breath and I made the video again. And I went to edit it and I stopped. And I left it alone for 24 hours. And here I am again for my third time of recording this video. And I just am not sure why. And part of me feels like maybe I didn't cover it all, or maybe I covered too much. But this is the story of, I don't want to say my life because that seems dramatic, but this is the story of me becoming a teacher and then leaving 5.5 years later. And what is the point of this video? This is not normally how I set up my videos. I normally make sports content, so maybe it's just out of my comfort zone. And, if you're into sports content, feel free to subscribe. But if you're here for the teaching story, don't feel any pressure. So I'm also going to try to do this in one take. The last few videos were multiple takes, and there was going to be a ton of editing. And again, it just felt forced. And so maybe this video is just for me. Maybe this is just sort of cathartic for me, therapeutic as an individual. And maybe you get nothing out of this. And that's also part of my problem. Every video I make feels like it has a goal. There is something I'm accomplishing in it. And this one, I don't know if it accomplishes anything except telling other teachers who may be in my position that you are seen from someone very far away, you're heard, you matter, and it doesn't have to be the way that it may currently be. So let's jump right in 2 minutes later. If you're still here, by golly, thank you. I am thankful that you are here, and if you last this whole video, congratulations. You deserve a pay raise, right? Because that's the joke teachers love to hear. Okay, so I was born in a city, and I lived in that city until this present day. I went to high school at a high school. I went to college, and then I went back to teach at the high school that I attended. So that is my story, and with that comes a lot of privilege. I was very comfortable with my area. I knew the socioeconomic status of my students, of my peers, right? I had experience living the life that the students I would eventually teach lived. So that it is a privilege and not something that everyone gets to say they have. So I will recognize that. So after high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do or be. And that is a big thing in our world, is just like college. Like you go to high school, you go to college. That's become the norm. And so that's what I did. And when I left high school, I wanted to be, believe it or not, a stand-up comedian. I enjoyed writing comedy. I did not enjoy performing comedy. I now know that I have anxiety. And at that time, I just thought it was nerves. Like I was just nervous to perform. But I realize now that those nerves were a very real response to the anxiety that I had, not only before a comedy routine, but before pretty much everything in my life. Like I would be in the bath. Like I in high school, I kept a poop journal. Okay. And I pooped in a year like 578 times. So that's a little less than 2 a day, but about 2 times a day. And I didn't know I had anxiety or irritable bowel syndrome until, well, we'll get to that. So I wanted to be a stand-up comedian, and I was at church camp, and they had a talent show, and I went to do my routine, and one of my jokes in there is about. One of my jokes in that routine was about how I grew up very sheltered. I grew up in an evangelical Christian household, and so my parents were very careful about what they exposed me to. And I wouldn't say they were like overbearing or strict in that way, but they were cautious. And so the joke goes, I was online and I saw an ad that said missionary position, and I thought, I wouldn't mind spreading my faith. Well, little did I know, some missionary positions involve spreading more than just your faith. Okay, that was the joke. Well, I say that joke, and the MC runs on the stage, and she grabs the mic out of my hand. She's like, "We don't tell jokes like that here." And I was like, "Well, can I skip it and just do the rest of my routine? And she's like, sure. And then I just got booed the whole time by like the band that was visiting to perform our worship. Like it was just a weird dynamic already for a kid with anxiety. And so I left that feeling kind of dejected. Like, is this something I really want to do? So that was the summer after my senior year. So I'm about to go into college, and I go into college and I major in telecommunications. And I figured if I can't major in stand-up comedy, telecommunications is close enough. Long story short, I lasted a semester in telecommunications. It was very overwhelming. I felt like a lot of the freshmen that I was in the program with had already come from a high school where they had a media program, and so they had experience working cameras and writing scripts and being in front of a camera, and I did not. So I was just very overwhelmed. Also, more of the evangelical underpinnings were I felt like I was being too self-seeking. I didn't feel like I was giving enough back to the world, which maybe a video for another time. While I do think maybe it's important to give back and be selfless, I also think I put too much pressure on myself at 18 years old to try to make a difference in the world. And I wish somebody would have sat down and been like, it's okay if you're a little selfish, because this is the life you're going to have to live forever. So after my first semester, I switched to elementary education. I was dating a girl who had a brother at the time who was in 5th grade, and I got along really well with him. He was exceptionally bright, which I took for granted. I didn't understand how bright he was and kind of how much of an outlier he was in terms of his ability and intelligence. And I thought all kids were kind of like him. I was like, I would love to do this for a living, work with kids, teach kids like him. And so I majored in elementary education. And I guess I will say that I don't regret that at all. It's a little bit of an interesting dynamic because I did feel out of place at times, right? Elementary education is dominated by females, and so I felt like an outlier in that way, which in some ways makes you feel like special and important, but in other ways gives you a little bit of imposter syndrome. And so I didn't necessarily struggle with that, but I felt like people in I didn't struggle with that when I was at the university I was at, but I struggled when I would talk about it outside of that. What are you majoring in? Elementary education. It's just kind of like, oh, like it's cute. And I don't know if as an 18 to 20-year-old, you want to be told that what you're going to do forever is cute. So that was something I got used to. I ended up teaching in a 5th grade classroom at a rural school, county school, 20 minutes out of my hometown. And I lived in the city, grew up in the city, ended up teaching in the city, but I taught in a more rural school. Ooh, I hate that. And it was okay. But it was my wake up call into that not all 5th graders are like my girlfriend's brother. In fact, he was much brighter than, all of those kids put together. And, kids couldn't read in 5th grade, were doing obscene things and recording it on their iPad. Just like, I was just kind of like, oh my, if a high schooler does this, I can justify it as like, oh, you're immature, grow up. But if a 5th grader does, I'm like, how do you know what that? So I was very caught off guard. I ended up getting mono and strep about 3 weeks before the end of the year. And the university was very strict and says, if you don't finish, you can't graduate. Well, there was no realistic, feasible, physical way that I was going to be able to finish with mono. So that threw a big wrench in it. I ended up having to go 2 weeks after I got out of college to make up for the time. It was a big mess, and I left and I graduated, and I kind of said, now what? I don't know if I want to do this, and this being what I just did, forever. In fact, I knew I didn't want to. So I was looking for jobs, and the school that I taught at had just had a big shakeup. Just the staff and the administration was just turned on its head, and different people were moving in and out, and whole departments were leaving. The school was just in a really bad spot, more so than when I attended it. And I just remember saying, why not just apply there? See what happens. I think I would be better off teaching high school. Hopefully those kids can read, right? Not that they will read when you tell them to, but they can read. So I applied, had an interview, got the job. Now, I had a gifted and talented minor, I guess you would call it. It was a concentration. So my major was ed, and my minor or my concentration was gifted and talented. And so they saw that and they said, oh, you're going to teach AP Lang, language of composition, and honors 10 sophomores. And so you'll get the honors 10 sophomores, and then when they go as juniors to AP Lang, you'll also get them. So that is something I'm thankful for now. In the moment, I talk about imposter syndrome. It's like, I have an ed degree. I've never taught a day in my life, and you're giving me the honors sophomores and the AP Lang, my first, like, so I walked in and I will say now I am very thankful that that is the classes I had. If I had an all general class list, I would not have lasted 5.5 years. I always had one general class. And guys, it was borderline impossible. And so if you're watching this and you have a general schedule in a low income city school, like, it's difficult. And I don't say that to cast judgment. I don't say that to put anybody down. Education is not always valued in certain communities and families, and it was my job to help them find value in it, and I tried my best. But when you get a 16 and 17-year-old in your classroom who's already had 12 potentially teachers that have ruined their education, and I hate to say, like, I'm not the victim here, but what am I supposed to do? And I still live in this like educator brainwashed space, and I'm going to call it that. It may be too aggressive, where like even I still feel guilty for saying that. Like, I should be able to sit here in front of you right now and say, yeah, if a kid comes into my room and doesn't want to learn and I'm trying my best to motivate him and they still won't put forth the effort, that's on the kid, right? Even saying that hurts me because I have voices in my head. I have teachers in my head saying, no, it's a teacher's fault, right? Because that's the way teachers are programmed. There's always something else you can do. There's always an extra step you can take. There's always another program you can try. Have you connected with them about their hobbies? Have you called their mom? Yeah. I've done it all, okay? And sometimes kids still can't grasp onto things or give an effort even. I don't care if you grasp onto it. I don't care if you learn. I don't care if you're smart. I just care that you try. But they don't say that in meetings. They don't say that in professional developments. They don't tell you, hey, 90% of your class, if they're there and they're listening to you, great. That 10% that wants to sleep, if you've put forth an effort and they won't do it, screw them, right? That's not something that's said in PDs, and I think a lot of teachers would benefit from that. And I get that that's harmful. I get that if we start living by that mantra, we could see education take a dive, or kids who have already been left behind get left behind. Like, I get it. But for me, okay, and we'll get back to my experience, I am not someone who was able to teach a class of 25, 30 kids and say, wow, 25 learned today out of 30. That's pretty good. Like 25 were paying attention, 25 were listening, 25 were offering answers, were sharing with their peers, and 5 weren't. That's a win. Because as teachers, we are so programmed to only care about the 5, at least in my experience. And so I would end a class and I would say, well, X, Y, and Z didn't do anything today. X, Y, and Z were on their phone. X, Y, and Z, and I would beat myself up over that. And it became the way I lived for 5.5 years. And I'll take responsibility for that in some respects for who I am as a person, but also some of it I think is on the education conversation as a whole. When you go to these PDs, when you go to college, it's like in college we were taught a phrase. It's not you can lead a horse to water, but you can't get him to drink. No, it's you can lead a horse to water, and if they aren't drinking, you need to put salt on their gums. Okay, that was what I was taught. And so if you've led a student to learning and they're still not learning, it's your fault because you haven't made them thirsty for this knowledge. So that's kind of my background about how I came into education. So my first few years, also a dynamic that's tough is the fact that I came in as a 21-year-old and I was teaching 16 and 17-year-olds, and that's not a big age gap. And so finding the balance of authority who can get your respect and also be someone who you can connect with was almost impossible. A lot of students could do that, but it only takes one or two in a classroom who thinks you are their friend that kind of ruin it for everybody. And that was something I struggled with because I knew from my experience, I learned best from the teachers I respected, who were kind to me, who said, "Hey, who do the Seahawks play this weekend?" Right when I was in school, if my math teacher would have said, "Who the Seahawks?" I watched the Seahawks game this weekend. I saw right like now all of a sudden, the unit circle pre-cal becomes more interesting, and so I would try to do that with students because that I believe is part of your job as a teacher, and again, some students were able to know the boundaries and some didn't and thought, well, the rules don't apply to me because I'm the teacher's friend. So that was one of my big problems, is that finding that balance. And I was never able to find that. And I don't know, it's not a regret necessarily, but it was what it was. So that caused me a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety as well. About 2 years into teaching, it was getting so in the mornings I could not get out of bed. And a lot of that has to do with just, okay, nerd time. I'm an Enneagram 6. I'm an INTJ, okay, on the Myers-Briggs. I'm very much an introvert, and being on for 6 to 7 hours a day is exhausting for me. I care about the opinions of others probably too much. If 5 people like me and one person doesn't, I'm going to be worried about that one person who doesn't. And as a teacher, when you have 100 students coming into your room every day, there's going to be somebody that doesn't. And I was always hung up on that. And that's a me problem. But I think a lot of teachers who care about students have this empathetic vein because you have to when you're teaching, and the opinions of others and others judging you makes it difficult. And so that was something that I never really got past. And I couldn't get out of bed. I'd go to school and I would feel sick, and I'd be in the bathroom 3 and 4 times before the first bell rang. And I'd have to leave in the middle of class to go to the bathroom. I was just so worried about, is my administrator going to come in and watch me? Am I doing the right things? Is the teacher next door talking about me? Is this kid going to cuss? And am I going to be able to handle it the way I'm supposed to without making him feel isolated, but also letting him know that there's a boundary and we shouldn't, it just was constant. And I went to the doctor and he said, maybe you need some medication. And I said, no, that's going to change my personality. It's going to change who I am. I don't need, people who are sick take medication. I'm fine. I'm just and I went a whole another year teaching. And my 3rd year teaching, I, one morning, had my head down on the table, on the desk. Pledge of Allegiance said, and I could not, I don't want to exaggerate. I couldn't physically make myself do my job without feeling like I was going to throw up. And I said that to them. I said, guys, I feel really sick. And I got a hold of the front desk lady and said, I need a sub. And I went home and I felt fine when I got home. I was like, that's weird. Long story short, I went back to the doctor. He said, do you want that medication? And I was like, you know what? I'll try it. He told me he was on it. And I was like, wait, if my doctor can take medication for anxiety, surely that makes it okay for me. So I took it, and I'm still on anxiety medication, and I will probably never go off anxiety medication. And I'm okay with that. And before I started, that was like a fear of mine. Like, oh no, I'm going to be on this forever. Yeah, I'm going to be on it forever. And guess what? I feel a lot better. So things improved after that a little bit. But as soon as things improved with me, things at the school started going downhill and downhill fast. And I don't want to get into all of that, but COVID also happened right after that. So we had COVID. Then we had a protest at our school for something that happened and got kind of political. And then rules were put in place because of the protest and because of COVID, which weren't conducive, I didn't believe, to education and to student learning. And so to give you an example, if a student failed the class, 0%, never turned a thing in, but passed the final with a 59.5%, a D minus, they would get credit for the class. Okay, so those are the type of things that I was dealing with at school. So I will say that again. If a kid did not turn in a single thing from August to December 17th, 0% in the class, I hand out the final. The kid gets a 59.5%, a D minus. They would get credit for my class. Okay, so we don't need to talk about that. I think it's pretty obvious that the motivation for students to try kind of goes out the window. And they would say that. All I have to do is pass the final. Like, I don't need to do my homework. And as a teacher, what am I supposed to say? I said what I was supposed to say. Well, it helps you learn the material. You need the material for the final. How do you think you're going to pass the final if you don't learn like, I've been a high schooler. Like, I know that mentality. Especially the kids who have above average IQ, right? I don't need to do the work. I can just do the final, right? So that was one big thing. In the year that I ended up leaving, we had other things like we went to a block schedule. So we did not have a prep every other day. So we were on a block schedule 5 days a week. We alternated different periods. Monday, Wednesday, Friday were one, and then Tuesday, Thursday were one. So like 1 week, my Tuesdays and Thursday, I wouldn't get a prep. I wouldn't get a break. I would have to watch a study hall. And then Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the next week, same thing. So for someone who needs downtime, who needs time to just relax and have silence for 50 minutes, I didn't get that. And that's maybe selfish. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, I don't get a break. You get a lunch break. Yeah, sure. And so that's why I'm admitting that maybe I was not in the right profession. So that was exhausting to have to manage. And you would think, well, kids just come in, they do their homework, they sit down, and then they leave. Like, that's a break. I wish. It's writing passes to the bathroom. It's making sure that everybody's in the same room. It's making sure the people who sitting in the floor aren't spilling their food everywhere. I got cussed out once, actually, because a girl came in tardy, and I acknowledged that it's not what it may seem. So I was completely and utterly exhausted my last year of teaching, and I don't want to necessarily dive so far into my final straw, the catalyst that actually made me leave. But in an AP class, and before I say any of this, I want to make it very clear. I was supported in this by my administration, my direct building administration. Nothing bad to say about them. By the teachers I worked with, nothing bad to say about them. And the students involved, I actually don't hold anything against them in any way. They're kids. They make mistakes, and hopefully they learn. Okay? Now, what happened? We were doing a project, and the kids I let do whatever they want for their project. You want to make a video? Great. You want to do a skit? Great. If you want to do a parody song? Great. If you want to do a collage and have some great. If you open-ended, okay? You express your interest, express your creativity, and show me what you learned through that. And I had a lot of success with it in 5 years. And I had a group of 4 students make a video, and they had made videos in the past. In fact, they had made a video their sophomore year because I had them back to back, and it was a little inappropriate. And I said, guys, this is too far. I actually sent it to their parents. Their parents were very supportive and very helpful, and they said, wow, you're right. I can't believe they turned this in. I'm embarrassed. I'm sorry, et cetera, et cetera. We all learned from it, okay? Same core group of kids next year, their junior year, make another video with inappropriate references, with inappropriate gestures, comments, material. Like there was a picture of a furry shown. If you don't know what that is, you're not a high school teacher. Like a half-naked furry with abs sitting there saying like, I'm sorry, daddy, or something. Maybe it didn't say daddy, but that's what it implied. Sorry. So they show this project to the class, and I say, guys, thank you, one, for doing the project. You did what I asked. You covered the content, but it was inappropriate. And they argued with me, what was inappropriate? I'm like, guys, seriously, like, let's move on, right? And they didn't move on. And in fact, when a girl who never spoke up, never presented, one of the shyest girls I ever had in 5 years, decided to show off her project, which was a huge step for her, something I'd never seen before. They were yelling, hooping, and hollering, interrupting her presentation. because they wanted to watch the video again to find the inappropriate parts. And I said, this has gone too far. So after the class ended, my practicum student, so I also had a student in there from a local university who was watching me teach, watched all of this unfold. She came up and said, do you know like what was in that video? Like, it was very inappropriate. And I thought, okay, so we had these kids interrupting class. We have someone without a vested interest in my room expressing concern with the video. What if she goes back and tells her professor what things they're doing in AP Lang, right? That's going to be a reflection on me. So I said, I'm going to be proactive here, and I am going to get this out of my hands. So I sent the video. I sent screenshots of the inappropriate parts. I typed up an 8 o'clock to 9:30 timeline of what occurred, who said what, who did what, and I sent it off to my four building principals. And it just so happens that the student in charge of the video, the leader of the group, his father may or may not have been a very important person above my principal, like maybe my boss's boss, maybe, perhaps. And he asked to have a meeting with me and the principal. And it was the assistant principal it was her first year in the building. So now I'm in a meeting with my student's dad, but also my boss's boss. Horrible dynamic. And looking back, it should have never happened that way. But that's what happened. And for the next 45 minutes in that meeting, I was told that I did my job incorrectly, that the son has never been in trouble before, and this is kind of ridiculous that it would happen now at an AP class where he has an A. That he watched the video, there was nothing inappropriate about it, that I should have written them up immediately and not 3 hours later, which as a teacher, you write them up when you have a chance, when you have a free second. I happen to have a free second 3 hours later at 11 o'clock, and that's when I did it. And I sat in that meeting knowing I was done. I sat like that. That was the first, and I had pondered being done, but I'd never had a reason to be done. And I sat in that meeting, and I knew I could not go back to my room because all authority had been stripped from me. Here I had my boss's boss coming in telling me, let the kids call the shots, like let the kids run the room. And they didn't get in trouble, and they went back, and students knew they didn't get in trouble. And I was having to defend myself for what I felt was right in the most bizarre way, like to an educator, to someone who should know. And I sat there and I broke down, and I cried in front of my boss and my boss's boss, and he didn't care. He just was then mad at my boss for how they handled the referral. It was a horrible situation at the time. It ended up being fantastic, which we can get to. It's 30 minutes already. And I left that meeting, and I immediately went back to my room, and some of my teacher friends were waiting for me, and I said, I'm done. I'm done. When your boss's boss tells you did your job incorrectly and strips you of all authority, you can't go do your job. I couldn't teach those kids anymore with them knowing that they had gotten away with something and they had all the power. And so I resigned the next day, and I finished out this was in November. So I finished out the year, and then I left at Christmas. And I have been not working ever since. So what is the point of this 30-minute manifesto? I'm not sure. Like I said at the beginning, maybe this was just cathartic for me to talk about. And it's selfish in that way. But I will say that if I had to go back and tell myself anything while I was teaching, I don't think I could have told myself anything in the moment that would have helped, because no singular comment or advice is going to change a personality. Nothing anyone could have told me would have made me care less about the one student who wasn't learning, who maybe would have cared less about the 3 students who hated my guts because I assigned too much. Like, I can't flip certain parts of me off, no matter how much advice. So I don't want to sit here behind a screen for anyone that I don't know watching a 30-minute video and give you advice. That's probably not going to help. And I think I've learned that some personalities are going to thrive in teaching, and some are going to have to really trudge through. And I was someone who was trudging through because it wore me down. When I left, yes, I was scared, but I will say that I come into this with a tremendous amount of privilege. I live in a low cost of living area. I don't have any college debt. My father taught at the university that I attended. And so I got 80% off tuition, and a scholarship covered the other 20%. I drive a 2004 Hyundai that my grandma gave me when she died. I am married, and my wife works full-time as a teacher, and 2 teacher salaries in our city is plenty for how we live. So I get, and this is maybe my saddest thing, that not everyone who wants to quit can financially afford to quit. And that is like the hardest thing for me to sit here and accept and say out loud to people, because I get that that's not possible. I was put in a position where I had no choice to quit, but I was also backed by my wife's income. My wife's income and money I had been able to save through my first 5.5 years of teaching. So I had that privilege, and I get not everyone does. Now, as scary as it would be, especially for someone with anxiety, someone who likes things a certain way, that doesn't like change, I would be tempted to tell myself, quit and work at Target. Quit and go down to Lowe's and fill out an application. Quit and see if you can't sit behind a computer and do something that's not so exhausting, because teaching will always be there. I don't know if that would have made me do anything, but it would have been an option. And knowing what I know now, knowing how I feel now, 1 year later of not teaching, I don't think I'll ever teach again, because I'm not meant for it. So my wife and I also have a daughter who's not old enough to be at school yet. So if we were to both work and put her in a daycare situation, it would be like 50% of my salary in a month. I was making, when I left teaching, $1,400 every 2 weeks. So $2,800 a month. You can do the math. Not bad, but I know some people can't live on that, or at least it's really tough depending on the parts of the country. I never complained about my salary. I knew what I was getting into, and I live in an area where a teacher's salary, especially 2, is fine. And I get that not everyone has that luxury. So I think the hardest part since quitting is just, and again, this is those evangelical underpinnings that I'm working through, and trying to, and maybe that's for another video, but this idea that the man has to do all these things, which is so stupid, right? Like, I'm at home with the kid and my wife works and we're happy. But that's not good enough for some people. And so people want to know, what are you going to do? 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 What are you going to, like, what I'm going to do is what's best for my family, and you're going to leave me alone. And I haven't told anybody that, but, hopefully they watch this video and see. So what am I going to do? What's the plan? I'm going to make these videos, not these. I'm going to make ones about sports and things that I love talking about, and I'm going to see what happens. Because that's my passion. And there are days I can't get out of bed to go teach. And there are days where I can't stay in bed because I'm so excited to talk about the football game on tonight. And I know that's so stupid. I know that's so lame, but, my wife is putting away Christmas decorations. Bless her heart. But that's where I am. So I asked my wife, I said, our daughter goes to kindergarten in 3 years. I'll watch her until 3 years. And I'm going to try to grow this YouTube channel. And I'm going to try to make something of it. Because if I can get back up to my teacher's salary in 3 years, like, that would be amazing. Like, I'm my own boss. I get to work my own hours. I get to do my own stuff. I get to love what I do. And I get to get paid for it through ad revenue. Are you kidding me? Right? So that's my goal. That's the goal for this channel. And again, I recognize that not everybody is in a position, like I would hate for someone to be watching this and say, oh yeah, you taught for 5 years and you quit to start a YouTube channel. Oh, rough life. Because I'm saying it's not. I'm saying that I am in the minority of people who have the luxury of doing that. And so that's why I hate being prescriptive and trying to give you advice while watching this if you're struggling teaching, because if you're down bad, as the kids say, you probably don't have the opportunities that I had to walk away. And I hate that. Like, if I could rescue you from it, I would. If I could give you advice, I would. That would actually help. So I guess what I'll leave you with is the comment section is there. If you feel like venting, offering any advice that you've had if you've left teaching, giving words of encouragement or hope to teachers who are there, please, okay? I'll try to interact with comments if this video gets more than 30 likes or views or however. I don't know what's going to happen, okay? I'm probably going to mess up the algorithm because YouTube's finally figuring out who wants my content. I'm finally picking up my views, and I'm going to throw a curveball and give them one about teaching. But hey, analysis paralysis is my demon, and I got to stop worrying about what could be and just send this out to the world and see what happens. So that's what we're going to do. This was all in one take. I'm extremely parched. Comment, like, subscribe, whatever the kids say. But seriously, guys, enjoy your Christmas break and quit teaching if you're fed up.